Hello, how are you doing? Welcome to another math lesson with Mr. Wilfred. I'm very excited to have you here today. Today we're going to be looking at Math 7, our very last unit, in last lesson in the unit of Unit 1, adding and subtracting integers. We're going to talk about evaluating algebraic expressions. So if you have the packet with you, please open it up. If you have you need to access the packet, feel free to do so on Google Classroom. But let me share my screen so you can look along with me right now. So we're talking about adding and subtracting integers, and specifically today we're going to be looking at it in the eyes of an algebraic expression. So take a second, as we usually do, begin to pause the video right now and look at the bell work. It says identify these missing numbers for the problem below. And then once you identify what the missing number is, just put it either on the blank area or put it on the missing number line that's available for you. All right, great. I'm hoping that you had enough time to pause the video, reflect on these problems and say, what number must these be? Because I believe, you're going to log into class and we'll go over it more detail in class. I'm just going to quickly give you the answers for all three of these bell work problems. That way you can see if you got it right or if you got it wrong. And then once I reveal the answers, if you did get it wrong, just take a second, maybe draw out what you thought the answers were and use counters to see if indeed it would have gave you each of these answers. So for example, if you put a number for 6 plus something, whatever number you put there, draw counters to see if it does give you 3. So for example, for the first one, and let's just call this one A, because I should have labeled them A. This one, 6 plus negative 3, it's what's going to give you our positive 3. For B, let's call this one B, 5 minus, right? 5 minus what gives me 8? And in this case, we should have put the number, I'm thinking I should have had my answer sheet right here. Give me one more second as I process it. It's going to be a negative 3. Okay, and as I remember that from my worksheet, I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. Right, remember 2 negatives are going to turn into a positive here, which really makes us 5 plus 3. And that's the reason why you're going to get 8 there. And for the last one, let's call this one C. Right, what number plus 7 is going to give us negative 1? That means that this number has to be a negative, and that's going to be a negative 8, okay? Now, once again, you can always check these answers by drawing counters using absolute value or some type of method that we have gone over to double check to make sure the answers are right. As of right now in class, we're not using calculators, but soon we will be. So if you want to check your answer with a calculator for this lesson, I would be okay, but just know that you should be able to add these integers rather easily without the use of a calculator. Let's go into what we're talking about for today. Now, we're going to talk about evaluating algebraic expressions, and that may be a very new term for you at this point. But I want you to know that an algebraic expression is really just saying we're going to substitute something in called a variable. Right? We're going to change it with a variable, and as you see in our visualizing vocabulary, the word variable is a quantity that may change within the context of a mathematical problem or an experiment or something like that. And it's typically using a single letter, right? A, B, C, X, Y, Z, some type of letter to represent an unknown. And these unknown letters, how can they help us solve math? Our goal, as we talked about within the first week of school, is to solve for unknowns, right? To do problem solving. And when we don't know something, that's an unknown, that's a variable. And in this case, I'm going to show you how variables can be useful, especially when substituting what you do know for the variable to help you solve a problem. So we're going to really focus on substituting numbers for variables today and do that, and then we'll be able to evaluate these algebraic expressions by doing that. So let me look at the modeling with you. I'm going to do modeling A and B. Student modeling C and D will be done in class to a student who I'm hoping that will come up and model it for us. But A and B, let's do them together quickly. So you see it says evaluate this expression W minus G. W minus G, when W equals 4 and G equals negative 5. Well, what does that mean, Mr. Wilfred? That means whenever we see a W, we're going to put 4. Whenever we see a G, we're going to put negative 5. Now I want to break this down into 4 steps for you. The first step, let's write the expression again, just so that way we can see it a little bit bigger. W minus G, right? Good. Second step, let's substitute. Now, what does substitution mean? When you hear substitution, what are you thinking about, right? I'm pretty sure we're going to get some great answers for that question in class. But substitution is really a way of switching or swapping something for another. So in this case, we're going to swap or switch the number 4 for the letter W. So every time we see W, we're actually going to put the number 4. Right? Whenever we see W, we're going to put the number 4. Now, the next thing that's here, right, we're going to look at and we're going to say, okay, this is a minus sign. We're going to bring this minus sign directly down. We're going to bring the minus sign down. Every symbol, whether it's plus or minus, we're going to bring it right down. We're not going to change anything yet, but we're going to just swap out the letters. That's the first thing we're doing. Well, the second thing we're doing, right? Now we see G. Now we got to say, okay, well, what does G stand for? In this case, it says when G is equal to -5. So I'm going to actually put that -5 in parentheses because I don't want two negatives next to each other without parentheses. So that's my second step. First step, we're going to rewrite the expression. Second step, we're going to substitute, right? We're going to substitute our letters for numbers. And the third step is 4 steps. So the third step is we're actually going to rewrite this. So instead of it being 4 minus a -5, we're going to do keep, change, change. And the reason why we're doing keep, change, change is because this is a subtraction problem, right? And then you're going to see another example when I do B for you in a second that it may look a little bit different. But in this case, we're going to do keep, change, change, which means we're going to keep the first number as a +4, change that minus sign to a plus sign, and then we're going to change this -5 to a +5, okay? So what we end up getting is 4 plus 5, when originally it was 4 minus a -5, right? Also, if you also want to know this, whenever you see two negatives right next to each other, know that that's going to change that number, whatever number follows, to a positive. And I'm going to show you that in example B because I know that's going to happen in B. But let's continue to finish this. So we rewrote it as 4 plus 5. And the final step here is to solve it. The final step is to solve it. Now, in this case, we should all be able to do 4 plus 5. That's not hard. But in case that the numbers were negative and you wanted to practice doing absolute value or counters, you want to show your work. And I would recommend you show your work for all of these work problems, all the problems in general. That way I can make sure you know exactly what you're doing. But this one here, I'm going to use counters. And as a hint, I would recommend you use counters throughout this whole worksheet. None of these problems are super high numbers or anything like that will make it where it'll be hard for you to do that. All right, so that one's not. Let me do B with you quickly. And we're going to follow the same 4-step pattern to solve this one. So step 1, let's rewrite the expression they're telling us. This expression is -t plus y. So -t plus y. The second step, we're going to look and say, okay, well, what did they tell us T stood for? What did they tell us Y stood for? So they tell you T is -4. That's the variable. Variable T, this unknown, is -4. And Y is -2. Okay, so now I'm going to substitute. Second step, substitute. Well, Mr. Warford, there's that negative in front of the T. What do I do with that? I got to get ready for class. We're going to bring down this negative first. The first thing we're going to do is bring down the negative. Then we're going to say, okay, well, what is the T? The T, we know that's -4. So put that in parentheses, -4. Bring down the plus sign, right? Bring down that positive sign. Then we have Y. Y is -2. And we're almost done. We are almost done. But one thing I want you to notice here is we have a negative times a -4 plus a -2. The third step says to rewrite it if you can. Not all the problems need to be rewritten, but most of them will be. In this case, it does need to be rewritten because this first part, negative times -4, that's going to change things. Mr. Woodford, can I use keep, change, change here? No, you cannot. But why? We did it on the last problem, and there was that double negative. That's because it was subtraction in the middle. This is addition. Do you see the difference? Right? One's addition, the other's subtraction. Here, we're just going to say, okay, well, when the negative times a -4, what happens? That creates a +4. I'm going to bring down the plus, and I'm going to leave this -2 in parentheses because we are accustomed to seeing subtraction as addition, so we like that anyway, right? We like having addition problems. The final step here is for us to solve it. Now, the way we solve it is we draw counters. I'm going to do counters throughout the whole worksheet. If you're more of an absolute value person, then please use absolute value. If you're more of a number line person, then please use the number line. But I'm going to use the counter. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And as a refresher, remember, they're open because they're positive. If you see closed ones, that indicates that they are negative. Okay? Okay. So we have 4 open and we have 2 closed. Now, since we have pairs, we're going to cross out the pairs. 1 open, 1 closed equals 0. They cancel out. So then we see, okay, what are we left with? We left with 2. Now, is that a positive 2 or a negative 2? It's a positive 2 because they are open. All right. So let me recap. There are 4 steps to where we're going to evaluate these expressions. And really, they're going to create problems that we already did earlier on in this lesson where they're adding and subtracting integers. You're going to need to rewrite them to addition. Yes. And that may mean that you might have to use keep, change, change. That may also mean you're going to see 2 negatives next to a number and realize that that's going to create a positive number. But I want you to do the first step, which is rewrite the expression. Second step, bring any of the signs you see. Negatives, bring them down. Positives, you bring them down. Just substitute for the letters, whatever they are, whether they're positive or negative. The third step is when we're going to rewrite that to make sense of it. Make sure it's an addition problem. Make sure that there's no double negative showing up anywhere. Okay? And finally, the fourth step, we're going to solve it. Now, you can use counters or absolute value. I personally recommend you use counters for this worksheet. That way you can see exactly what your answers are going to be. All right? Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was a big help. I hope that you was able to get something from it. Now, remember, you can always pause the video, rewind it, go back and rewatch it to get a better understanding of the concept. Until then, look forward to teaching you on the next lesson. Have a great day. Bye-bye.